This is going to be a very unique event because this is going to be an educational seminar directed specifically to strategies for individuals with Angelman syndrome. And I think, as you all know, that's probably a very rare event because our kids are about oh, there we go. Okay, so thank you for coming to the event today. I'm going to let Erin and Mary-Louise introduce themselves in just a second. I just wanted to give you a few small pieces of information. First of all, there are pads of paper and pens in the back if you need something to take notes on. You feel free to use your computers. There are educational packets that are being handed out. Hopefully each family has one. There are just a few things to follow along with. If you're at home, you can download them from the www.cureangelman.org website. They're on the very first page. You can also download them on your phones if you have phone access. We are taping this event today. It is going to be taped live, and then it's going to be edited with the PowerPoint slides, so none of you need to be recording anything or worrying about the recording. We're going to have it live, and if you feel like at home you're not seeing something you want to see, it'll be in the edited video. That video will be free for everybody. We'll let you download it from the site. So just try to enjoy, have a good time, listen to all the great information you're going to get. Please keep in mind that we are recording this, so if you have a second, turn your phones to vibrate and not on would be really helpful. And when we give you opportunities to ask questions, we're going to ask you to come up and use the microphones. Again, be sure to remember this is live, so you may not want to come on and say, I hate my speech pathologist whose name is this. Because it will be recorded and that could come back to haunt you. Okay, so I'm going to let Erin get started. Erin's first. Erin's going to get started. Okay, and we're going to ask you to hold questions until they get to the end of their presentation, and then at each section we're going to stop, get some questions, and then move on to the next section. At the very end of the three presentations that we're going to do today, there's going to be an open session to ask any question that you want of these two experts in the field. So hope that you'll stay for that. And after that, I'm going to hand it over to Erin.
All right, is the mic working? Okay. One other request we had is we have a few individuals with Angelman in the room and a few other people with sensory integration challenges, so if we can keep it less stimulating, if anybody wants to clap because we're so fabulous, if you can clap quietly, we will see that. I think that'll help with the recording as well, but we're just going to try to keep the volume down so that the workshop itself is, frankly, most accessible to the folks we're directing it at. So my name's Erin Sheldon. Mary-Louise, I think we were originally going to introduce you first. Oh, but I know, that's why I'm starting. I put, this is Jackie Mills and her son Eli. Eli's 22? Yeah, 22 now. I just put them up there because they have, oh, I'm getting emotional. Eli has Angelman syndrome. Jackie's his mom. She has been my role model. She has built a life with Eli that every single one of us would be proud for every child we might have. And she made me believe anything is possible. So here she is. All right, Mary-Louise.
Hello, I'm Mary-Louise. Oh, that's a bit loud. Sorry. This is my mob. I entered the world of Angelman about 5 years ago when I arrived in a daggy little classroom, and I had 6 children in the class, 4 of whom had Angelman syndrome or deletion positive. The most amazing, wonderful, fantastic, challenging, wriggly-jiggly, sensory, fast class I have ever had. And they challenged me to learn more. They challenged me to extend my thinking. Through my class, I met and became involved with the Angelman Syndrome Association of WA, which is Western Australia, where I'm from. I joined the Angelman listserv and started posting on there and learning from other families that are on there. Taught that class for 2 years, then moved on and started working one-on-one with families. And then last year, the Angelman Syndrome Association of Western Australia and I decided that enough was enough, and people with Angelman syndrome from birth to, we've got adults in their 40s and 50s, were not getting the communication support they needed from any disability service provider. And it wasn't the fault of the disability services provider. It wasn't a funding issue only. It was an issue of no speech pathologist knew enough about sensory processing issues, motor planning issues, complex communication needs, and the needs of individuals with Angelman, enough to support the individual and their family and their workplace, their teacher, their education assistant. So everything ended up being pear-shaped and going down to the basics of yes, no, more, finish. So we applied for some funding. We got a fantastic grant, and over the last year I have led pilot projects doing communication groups with every single person with Angelman in our state, which is half of Australia, except for 2 in the very north of our state. Through this project, we have found new people with Angelman. We have had one man in his 40s just recently receive his genetic diagnosis because we found him through other things, and his mum has finally found some people that she can mesh with. And so that has been incredible. So from 2 years old up to the 40s, we now have done a pilot project of what intervention works, what families need, how schools can help. So now we can say, right, this has worked, this hasn't worked, this has kind of worked. So next year we get more funding, hopefully, fingers crossed. Thank you very much, Disability Services. And then we can take this a step further. So today I'm just going to share with you what I have learnt on my journey with people with Angelman syndrome and their families, because it's the individuals and the families themselves that have taught me the most. Some people introduce me as an expert, but I'm not. I am learning as much every day, every new person I meet. And I really want to hit home that someone might say to you, oh, your child's got Angelman. I've taught a child with Angelman. And you need to say, that's fantastic. You've taught one child with Angelman. Okay, my child is not that child. So today we're going to talk about general strategies. There will be little bits that you can take away. There might be a lot that you can take away. But we all know that your child has more to do with being your child than just having a wonky bit on number 15 chromosome. So please remember that and hit that home to anyone that works with your child. My child is not Angelman syndrome. You are not to reduce my child to their syndrome, because they are a child first and foremost. Sorry, that's what I think our system just destroys families that way. Anyway, I'll stop talking. Now we've both cried, so there we go.
So you'll notice that on the front of your handout there's an action plan. We're going to be covering a lot of what I think is frankly brilliant stuff. But we know that there's going to be bits and pieces that we think will jump out at you as going, now that's something I can do that at home. And we just put this on the front as sort of a little worksheet for you to jot those ideas down. There's a lot of stuff in the written packet. There's a lot of stuff at home that families can download. But we just wanted to... and stop crying or you're going to make me cry. I know, I'm so bad. We just wanted to kind of give you that little worksheet to organize your thoughts as the workshop continues. We're back on? I'm back on. Okay. So Mary-Louise just introduced herself. So this is my mob. I am mom to Maggie. This is my last picture of me with Maggie. I think it's like 3 years ago. So this is Maggie. She's 9. She's deletion positive, and my younger one, Ella. I'm a Master's of Education candidate at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. I started out studying inclusive education and universal design for learning, which is how we organize, how we learn so that every learner can learn in the same environment. It's brilliant stuff. And I very quickly decided that we already know how to teach so that every learner can learn together in the same classroom. What I needed to know as a parent was how can I influence what happens in the classroom so we can take that information we already know and actually start using it in my daughter's classroom. So I moved on to studying parent advocacy for students with significant disabilities. In today's seminar, we're going to talk about how Angelman syndrome affects an individual learner regarding their communication, their learning, and how they develop relationships. And Mary-Louise will spend a good portion of time on how the supports that our kids need to develop autonomous communication. We're going to talk about some classroom strategies and technologies that help meet the needs of students with Angelman as learners, and talk about how we develop a vision for our son or daughter's education and advocate for that vision. I will often say child just because my kid's a child, but we really mean our sons and daughters of any age. I think we have a wide age group, and our children are lifelong learners. We are lifelong learners, and our kids' teachers and therapists are lifelong learners. So all of this is really meant to apply all across the lifespan. We'll go over some of the resources that we've made available, but we've given you snippets in your packet. We actually have a lot more that we're hoping to make available online, and then we'll have Q&A at the end. Okay, so my research questions, I just figured I'd throw these out there for you guys, is what is effective parent advocacy? Honestly, I'm still trying to find the answer to that, but how can I be the most effective advocate for Maggie that I can be? All the research shows that parents become advocates because we see our kids in school and we say, something's not right. My child's needs are not being met the way they need to be met. My child has potential that's not being tapped into. What is it I need to do about it? And then there's this whole literature, there's all these workshops you can go to about how to be an effective advocate. And it's often, to me, sort of how to be the squeakiest wheel to get the most grease. As though what parents want is the most resources spent on our child. And if we just could get the most thrown at them, that we'd be happy. Something that I have found with Maggie's education is I really don't want the most. Sometimes I want them to start doing less, but what I want them to do is to do things differently. What I really want to do is influence how they think about my daughter as a learner, not as an Angelman syndrome, not as a disabled child, but how they actually think of her as a learner and how they build on her learning. So how do I, as a parent, influence teachers to think about my child differently? That's been what I'm trying to sort out. Right, so I think I already covered this. I started out going, well, let's just figure out what it is we're supposed to be doing in classrooms, and what I've learned is we already know what we need to be doing in classrooms for a lot of learners. What we need to know, what I think we need to know as parents, is what motivates all of us to be open to changing what we believe about disability so we can actually change how we educate our kids. Because what we believe is what we end up teaching. Go ahead. All right, oh, go back. All right, so this is what we all learn about Angelman syndrome. This is the the consensus diagnostic criteria. I don't need to spend much time on it. I'm sure it's quite familiar to all of us. The severe developmental delay, our kids have a movement disorder, unique behavior. I would say Maggie has sort of an effervescent, buoyant personality. Speech impairment, usually very little language, and so on. We will cover the things that we feel sort of from this list that directly affect how our kids are as students in the classroom, as learners over their lifespan. But I threw this out there because I know that at least for me, Maggie was 15 months when she got the correct diagnosis of Angelman syndrome. She'd been misdiagnosed before that. And all I saw for me was that my beautiful baby girl was no longer Maggie. She was now that. And I think so many of my expectations of what might be possible for her were limited by all of that. And I think that we have to kind of acknowledge this is how we generally start out on our journey with Angelman syndrome. And then a lot of what we have to do is learn how to undo the damage of this kind of thing and how this affects our ability to think of our children. I know when my daughter started kindergarten, to me it seemed like they didn't see her as a learner where they had to figure out a plan for how they were going to teach her. They saw her as a very needy child who they had to take care of. And her health was not good at the time. She'd been critically ill just before. That certainly didn't help any. But my journey as a parent advocating for Maggie has been getting everyone to stop paying attention to that and just look at the kid in front of them and think about everything we know about teaching, everything we know about learners, and now start applying that to my kid. All right, I want to address the concept of high functioning versus low functioning. We know that Angelman syndrome affects each person differently. Maggie is much more my daughter and my husband's daughter, for better or for worse, than she is a child with Angelman syndrome. So she's got all my best and all my worst. If she's got ADHD, she came by it honestly. And that's just my kid. Each characteristic of AS is impacted by all of our child's other genetic information. So I know this is being live broadcast. I hope my husband's family doesn't mind this, but they're very quiet, reticent people, just like me. Not very chatty. Sometimes some of my in-laws having a conversation. So you went to Algeria, how was it? Hot. Okay. Maggie is also not a very chatty person. I think by nature, inherited from her father's side, much more than mine, she has come by a naturally reticent personality. She just doesn't seem to have a whole bunch to comment on. The way in my family we all talk all over each other. That's just how she is. Angelman syndrome certainly doesn't make her chattier than it would have otherwise. But we often describe kids with Angelman as being high functioning or low functioning based on certain characteristics of Angelman. And we privilege certain traits as being proof. So if a child can walk, they must be high functioning. If they can sign, they must be high functioning. If they can use an augmentative communication device, that makes them high functioning. And I would just really, I'm hoping that we'll all really challenge our ideas of what we think high functioning means over the course of this. So Maggie is a class 1 deletion positive, meaning she's got one of the larger deletions. She's got epilepsy. She doesn't really eat. She has a G-tube. Her first diagnosis was autism. She actually meets the criteria to be fairly severely autistic. She has low vision and cortical vision impairment. She has very high tone rather than low tone, which a lot of our kids have. And she has quite strong balance. So people see her walking around with her iPad, and they go, oh, look at that high-functioning kid. In Maggie's case, she has certain traits, like high muscle tone, strong balance, that have made walking a much easier thing for her to learn. I think she walked just after she turned 2. So walking was not as big a challenge for her because the way that Angelman affected her, it just didn't affect her muscle tone the way it affects a lot of other kids. It doesn't seem to have affected her balance the same way. However, she's lost her ability to walk 3 times due to either illness or epilepsy. So the way that epilepsy has influenced her has affected her, has also influenced how she can do various skills. This doesn't, to me, make her high functioning or low functioning. And what you'll see that we're going to talk about is it's really how the rest of us react to a child in a lot of ways that determines how high functioning or low functioning they are. One thing that's absolutely consistent with almost all of our kids is they are often consistently inconsistent, right? So on one day, all the stars align and Maggie is rock steady. She'll walk up and down stairs without a rail. She'll just come strolling down the stairs, holding her iPad, walking right down the stairs, and the next day she's holding your hand for support. That's just the nature of how the syndrome is with her. And that's quite an important thing to know because you might see her one day and think she's really high functioning and see her the next day and feel that she's low. I think a lot of our kids are that way. You have to be very aware of that if you want to do any form of assessment, because if you're trying to tell me how my kid is, the way she is right now may not mean much about how she's going to be tomorrow or next week or how she is in a year. So the environment shapes how well we function. I think this is really important to think about. So disability is impairment. It affects our biology. Obviously, our children's biology is strongly affected by Angelman syndrome. But really, what disability is the gap between what our biology permits us to do, what our bodies and our brains permit us to do, and what it is we need to do in all of our various contexts, what we need to do at school, what we need to do at home, all the things we need to learn, all the things we need to communicate. So disability creates this gap between our biology and what it is we need to do. My glasses, I'm practically blind without them. An environment can be disabling. Without the tool of my glasses, you're all just a big blurry mob, right? It's a disability if I don't have a tool to fix it, but it's not a disability as long as I've got my glasses on. So assistive technology is the set of tools that bridge that gap between our biology and the environment in which we need to function. But the tool has to be the right one for the job. And what I think is particularly important for our kids with Angelman is often they get a bunch of tools thrown at them that aren't actually matched to what they actually need, so that they can function in all the environments and the contexts that we put them in. So if you give someone a wheelchair when what they need is a device that can speak for them, that doesn't address the disability, right? That's a pretty obvious example. But if we're not correctly matching up the supports our children need to function, they're going to appear low functioning because they're not receiving the tool that fills the gap between what their biology doesn't let them do and what it is that they need to be able to do. So for me, as a parent, the way I try to think about it is my job is to be the problem solver. What is the gap? What is it Maggie needs to be able to do, and what is the tool that can help her fill the gap? I don't worry about whether she's low functioning or high functioning. I think about what is the gap? What do we need to fill that? What opportunities does she need to have? What technology does she need to have so that we can try to fill that gap? And it really becomes a matter of not what can Maggie do, but how can she do it? What does she need in order to be able to do what she needs to do? So there's two kinds of barriers. I think the biology of our kids creates some barriers, but the beliefs of the people around them also can create barriers or can create opportunities. So to me as a parent, I'm constantly thinking about the beliefs of the people who educate Maggie about the meaning of her disability. If they think she can't do something, they're not going to try to teach it to her. And we know one thing for sure. We know absolutely one thing for sure about learning, which is that if we don't teach it to someone, they're probably not going to learn it on their own, right? So the beliefs about how we problem solve around our children's disabilities are just very important. Depending on the beliefs that people have, if a speech therapist believes that a child has a whole broad range of things they need to be able to communicate, then they can apply those beliefs to get funding to make sure that that child has tools and assistive technology to help them communicate a broad range of things. And if a speech therapist believes that a child needs to be able to communicate more and finish, then they will apply those beliefs to actually close off opportunity for the child to have more technology. So the beliefs that come to our children's education is very important. And our beliefs as parents, the beliefs of our children's educators, their therapists, their doctors, people in the community, all of that can either reduce barriers for our kids or can increase them. So our kids already have this gap. Their biology has created this gap between what they need to be able to do and what their body lets them do. The people around them can make that gap bigger or can make it smaller based on how we respond to that. So when you see a child who's really high functioning, it may be a child for whom the environment, the tools at their disposal, and the beliefs of the people around them are best addressing that gap between what their biology lets them do and the things that they need to be able to do to function. What we need to be able to do is to problem solve and figure out how we can match that gap how we can fill that gap for all of our kids. So again, it's just coming down to the idea that addressing our children's needs is about problem solving so that we can address that gap between their biology and what they need to be able to do. So, and our children's environments absolutely shape how well they function. So the questions that I ask with Maggie are, does she have the necessary tools she needs to bridge the gap between her biology and what she needs to do to be able to function? No, she doesn't. I'll tell you right now, she does not, and we are nowhere close. So I am not an expert. I have not been able to make all this happen for Maggie. Are all of her tools accessible when she needs them? No, they're not. Is she being effectively instructed in how to use the tools that she has? No, She's not. She's got an iPad, but have we figured out effective instruction on how to use the communication apps so that she can really use it? No, we haven't. And does she have to prove that she can be competent to use tools before she can even have access to them? Yes. Over and over and over again, in many contexts that Maggie is in, she has to first prove she can learn to do something before anybody will try to teach it to her. And I think that is very common for all of our children. And we have to really be able to address that and take that on and challenge it. The reality is we don't expect any kindergartner to prove that they can graduate for high school before we put them into school. So why do these systems force us to prove our children can use things before they can receive instruction on how to use them and before they can get access to them? We just have to challenge this on many different levels to try to, because our kids will never get what they need to fill that gap between their biology and what they need to be able to do if they have to first prove themselves, especially when they're consistently inconsistent. So I know with my kid, she has expressed a huge variety of things at home that have just been absolutely amazing. And if only I had them on video to show them to a speech therapist, maybe we could get something right. But then when the speech therapist sees her in the little windowless room with all the shelves full of all the switch devices, Maggie won't do any of it. So this is just where it really comes down to the beliefs of the people around and the environments our kids are in. Go ahead. How other people's beliefs shape how well our children function. What do others believe our son or daughter needs? If the teacher believes that what Maggie needs is to be in the classroom for the social benefits of being with all the other children, she's going to teach her very differently, and Maggie's opportunities are going to be very differently than if she believes she's in the class because she's a learner who's there to be taught, right? You know how it is when someone says to you, "I know what you need, let me tell you what you need." Right? None of us really appreciate having somebody else tell us what they need. However, with our kids, on a daily basis, people line up to make checklists of everything they need without usually asking our children what our children need, without really looking at our kids in terms of what our kids are trying to do, what our kids are trying to learn, and saying, what does that person feel they need? How can I meet what that person is expressing they need rather than what I'm assuming they need? Do others around our sons and daughters believe that they need to be able to communicate all of their thoughts or just what they want and need? If a speech therapist is satisfied that my kid can ask for the toilet, she's got a lot more to say than the toilet. And actually, most of what she communicates is her rather negative response to people who think that she has very little to communicate. She's sort of the queen of the drop and flop, the oh, you think I don't know how to say no? Well, let me show you the ways. So do others believe that our children need the opportunity to participate and be full members of the group? Or are kids included in a class or included in some activity as a charity? Are they there to receive the charity of others? Do people truly believe that our kids are there to make an important contribution? I will tell you right now, Maggie makes a very important contribution, and so do all of our sons and daughters. They change every environment they go into, and we need to acknowledge what they're doing that actually improves it. I know when Maggie gets impatient in class about the slow pace or something that's boring, she is expressing the frustration of a lot more kids than just her. When she says, you know what, we really need to move this one along. And so it's our child's beliefs, and this is really important to me. What are we teaching our children to believe about themselves? When, for example, the entire class of grade 4 students is working on a mapping assignment and they're learning about the countries in Africa, and Maggie is handed a crayon and told to just scribble on her page, what is she being taught about her abilities as a learner, right? So we have to think about what are the things we are on purpose teaching to our kids and what are the things that are being accidentally taught to them that are shaping their beliefs about what they can learn. Does Maggie believe she has the right to communicate? I think she does, because I think she's actually a very authentic communicator. I don't know. Does she believe that others listen to what she already expresses? I'm not sure. I'll tell you, I am very nervous about where Maggie's at right now. She's 9. And I think the reason I've gotten so passionate about so much stuff with her education is I feel we're at a really important moment with her where she is shaping her beliefs about her own rights, where she is, right now, she's really asserting her right to autonomy in a lot of ways. When the EA says, it's time for you to go pee, and she's like, no, it's not. Who are you to know my bladder better than me? We are creating situations where she is being told, I feel, not to trust her own body, not to trust her own biology. I get to tell you when to pee. I get to tell you when to eat. I get to tell you when you need a body break. Is she learning to trust her own self, or is she learning that she's actually not supposed to express herself? I think that this is very, very important because Maggie is already a very reticent kid. She's not one of our kids with Angelman who's just like, hi, how are you? She's kind of like, you got an iPhone? I'll look at your camera roll, but could you keep your eyes over there? She prefers to meet people through their camera roll on their iPhone. So she's already one who's sort of difficult to pull things out of. And if she is taught through the education system that she's not supposed to express herself, we're going to have she's already got a disability around communication. We have to make sure we don't teach her not to trust her right to communicate. Does she have a story to tell and someone to tell her story to? We work really hard to make sure Maggie has lots of experiences to tell a story about. We haven't been as successful giving her tools to tell her story and making sure that she's got people to actually tell her story with. Not whether she wants goldfish crackers or which color marker she wants, but really people to share stories with, to build relationships with. Does Maggie believe she's a competent learner? I don't know. I'm very concerned that Maggie right now at age 9 is forming her beliefs about her own ability to learn, and that's why I feel it's so important that we're not accidentally teaching her that she's stupid. Does Maggie believe she's powerful right now? She absolutely does. I'm positive of that. She is in full control of her body, and she lets you know what she's asserting, but I feel that if her communication with her body is perceived as behavior, they could beat that out of her. So this has been a really important question to me. But honestly, when it comes down to it, of all my IEP goals, I want Maggie's IEP goals for me are that she learn to believe she's a competent learner and that she believes that she's powerful. And that she believes that she is there at school to make an important contribution and to be a full member of her learning community. And I believe she's actually learning this. Something that's been really powerful is as we've provided Maggie with iPad technology, she has several iPads. What do you get for a kid who already has 3 iPads? I don't know. Is that her iPads are used all throughout the classroom. And something we've learned with Maggie is that Maggie really needs stuff hands-on. She is not one to sort of sit back and watch something being demonstrated. She wants to touch it. Well, you know what? So do a bunch of other kids. Maggie really learns from video and video demonstrations. So if you're going to talk about how clouds form in the atmosphere, after you've explained it, let her watch it on YouTube. Guess how many more kids in her class learn better when they get to watch the video with her? Maggie has a lot of challenges learning how to write. So do a bunch of kids in her class. The biggest challenge that her teachers expressed to me is the kids can say, they can write, I did this and I liked it, but they can't explain why. They just don't elaborate on that. So Maggie has tools on her iPad that help all of the kids become better writers. And it's been very important to me that she see her tools being used by all the kids in the class, and she sees that she's making that contribution by sharing her technology and by creating urgency around why we have to teach in a way that meets Maggie's learning needs, because she does. She's very good at creating an urgent situation to meet her learning needs. But when we have to meet Maggie's needs for things to be hands-on, multimodal, not just me lecturing, but actually something that she can touch, something that she can learn from experience, we're making her classroom a more effective learning environment for a lot of kids who are otherwise not good book learners. All right, and motivation is absolutely key to how all of our children function, and I think it's key to all of the rest of us, right? It's key to how our teachers function, it's key to how our kids' therapists function. Years ago, just by the time Maggie was diagnosed, I read an interview with a man named Norman Coons, who just had a huge influence on us. His essay was called The Stairs to Nowhere. And it was about his experience as a boy with cerebral palsy. He couldn't speak at the time, had cerebral palsy, and the hours of his life that were spent climbing the stairs to nowhere that led to a wall in the therapy room and then back down again. And he spent hours and hours of his life trying to learn how to climb the stairs that led to nowhere. Our sons and daughters need a way to be mobile, but they also need somewhere they really want to go and people that they want to go there with. They need to have authentic choices and autonomy over their lives. We know in the field of education that motivation is key to learning, and that having authentic choices and autonomy over how you learn is absolutely essential. So think of that teacher who said, here's your spelling list, I'm doing a spelling test. It's just random words that have no meaning to you, you just simply have to do it. Here's your homework, fill it out, it's a worksheet. You just have to do it. That isn't effective teaching for any of us. None of us can remember how to spell those words or have never used them, that kind of thing. Having authentic choices and autonomy over their life means learning through experiences and being able to choose what works for you. For Maggie, she'll tell you most of the time, she really likes to do her schoolwork on an iPad. So do about half the kids in her class. I'm looking around, a lot of you are taking notes. Some of you are taking notes by videotaping or by audio recording. Some of you are taking notes with old-fashioned pens and papers, and some of you are taking them on iPads. We all are exerting control and autonomy over how we take in this learning, right? Because we've got multiple choices of technology to choose from or tools to choose from, and we're using it. Same thing that our students need, any student needs to be able to learn better. Key to motivation is having reciprocal relationships that involve and expand as they age. If you don't feel an emotional connection with a teacher, if you don't feel an emotional connection in friendship, a sense of belonging with your classmates, you won't learn. All of the bullying research shows us that kids stop learning when they don't feel emotionally supported in their learning environment. Everyone needs a sense that they are competent and smart before they will learn. If you believe you are stupid, you will not learn. If you are taught that you are stupid, your learning will stop, because we have to believe that we're competent. So we have to make sure that when we're teaching kids, we are giving them that right level of challenge that lets them be successful at something and teaches them that they're smart so that they go on to be successful at something else. I bet every one of us has an experience of trying to do something that was too hard, feeling like a failure, and we turned around and walked away from it. We didn't master it because it made us feel stupid, and so we didn't learn it. So this is just a key part of how we motivate our kids with Angelman. And all of this, so motivation theory is part of what I study in school. All of this is what leads to self-determination. So self-determination is when you feel related to the people around you, you have deep relationships, you feel competent, you feel like you can do the things you need to do, and you've got control and autonomy over your life. And when all of these things are in place, it's when we do the learning that stays with us for life, that builds with us for life. It isn't the learning for the test, it's the learning that lives with us for life. That's what we need for our kids with Angelman. They need to be learning how to communicate in a way that they will be communicating for life, not communicating with a PEX card right now with this therapist, but then not be able to do that in the next room that they go into when they leave from that, right? Okay. All right, so what I think Angelman means for Maggie right now is she really needs a system that respects her current forms of communication and supports her to express all of her thoughts, wishes, irritations, and dreams. I honestly think Maggie's more motivated to communicate her irritations right now than just about anything else. She needs instruction and support to develop her emerging skills to read and write. She needs seizure freedom without side effects, and she needs our support to be rested and healthy, because with her sleep disorder, she is not rested and healthy unless we really support her to do that. All right, so here are the key issues, the key aspects of Angelman syndrome that really impact how our kids are as learners. And these are not in any particular order, it's just how we organize them in terms of when I'm talking versus Mary-Louise. So we'll talk about the GI tract and diet, we'll talk about sleep, we'll talk about pain and self-injury, the impact of epilepsy, both the seizures themselves and how we try to treat them, the impact of their behavior, of their personality and behaviors, what's considered challenging behaviors, their sensory processing needs, their vision, their motor planning, We've already covered this a bit, the expectations and beliefs. Mary-Louise is going to take it to a new level, and we're going to talk about their complex communication needs. Okay. So key issues for learning. I think this is quite an important one. Food is often used as a motivator for many of our kids. How many of your kids have been taught to do something about communication using food in some way as the motivator? Anybody? Okay. This is something we really need to be concerned about, partly because it's teaching our kids that communication is the act of asking for more, when most of our kids maybe use their eyes, their voice, their hands to indicate when they want more, their faces, what they're looking at, right? They've got many ways to indicate more, but what's actually more complicated is being able to communicate, I really like this is yummy, or ugh, that was gross. And we really have to think about what we're actually teaching them about food when what they're taught about food is more. Some of our kids, like my daughter, has a very restricted diet and malnutrition. I know kids with Angelman who only eat starches. They only eat potatoes and noodles, and that's just about it. Or they only eat bread. They only eat bananas. We really have to take that seriously for how it's going to impact their learning, because no one who is malnourished can be an effective student. So if your child has a very restricted diet, really make sure that they're being monitored. There's treatments for that. I won't get into it. In my kid's case, it was severe enough that she got a G-tube. Go ahead.
Sorry, Erin. Can I just say, as a teacher, I am very, very concerned about food as a motivator, because what I see in children when I go into schools is education assistants and teachers with little tool belts on, full of M&Ms and candy, and every time the child does something, they get an M&M. Every time the child does something in better, they might get 2 M&Ms. In kindy, it's 1 M&M. By grade 5, it's 10 M&Ms. When I have now working with adults who will not move unless they have a bag of M&Ms dangled in front of them. They are morbidly obese, and no one ever thought that would happen, because when they were children, they never stopped moving. They were skinny, they were manic, they were wriggly-jiggly. No one believed that they could be motivated to learn for learning's sake. Nobody taught them about intrinsic motivation and falling in love with learning. So this food as a motivator, please have a think about it. Learning is about more than M&Ms. It's about more than external motivation. And if you start an intervention like food, you must have a way of fading it. Because otherwise, we know as lots of people with Angelman syndrome hit puberty, they become more sedentary, they put on weight, they get scoliosis, things happen. The last thing we want is morbidly obese people that we have impacted on, when we could have done something when they were 4, versus now having to help them unlearn. We're having to unteach those things that we taught them, and that's cruel. So have a think now, whether your child is 4 or 12 or whether he's a young adult, think, okay, we need to have a way of scaling this back. Fruit's another matter, but it's still food. And what we're also teaching is that whenever I go into a restaurant, it's very hard for me to go into a buffet restaurant with my friends who have Angelman, because food is like, over I go. Now, what I need to learn is not that I want more food, more, hit the switch to get more, but life isn't all about food. I can talk about food. I can talk at the table. We can discuss things. We can learn. It's not about food equals life.
So in your packet, I think the second page is the table of contents for the Discern Clinical Management Guidelines. This is the page on feeding and diet. We only put the table of contents in. It's really just to jog your memory so that you know this exists. This came out of Europe I think it mostly came out of the UK. Jill Clayton-Smith, Dr. Bernard Dan, they were some of the experts who helped put this together. These clinical management guidelines have been adopted by the American Academy of Pediatricians as the clinical care guidelines for individuals with Angelman syndrome. So keep this in mind, but I just wanted to point a few things out. Part of why I think food becomes so important to our kids is that so many of them have feeding difficulties when they're very small. We have to monitor their weight gain carefully, and I know my daughter was extremely failure to thrive for a long time because she couldn't feed effectively as an infant. And many of our kids, like mine, had quite severe reflux and so simply couldn't gain weight. So we become very concerned about our teeny tiny children. There's a different growth chart for individuals with Down syndrome because they know that people with Down syndrome grow on a different trajectory and have different expectations. That hasn't been investigated yet for Angelman, but there is such a consistent pattern that I've seen in many of our kids being teeny, teeny, tiny when they're little, very small babies, very small toddlers. They often look younger than they are, and then something happens about school age and they suddenly grow very quickly. And we have to know that and be able to plan for it so we don't freak out too much when they're really little and not growing, and we therefore feed into the feeding them anything is better than letting them eat too little. In my daughter's case, she had a very rapid metabolism as a toddler, so when she got her G-tube, they had to constantly increase the amount of formula. They calculated the number of calories that a 2-year-old needs, and they started giving her that much formula, and they had to increase it and increase. They had to double the number of calories she got compared to a typical 2-year-old because she was burning off that many calories. Now she has a very normal metabolism, and we can expect by looking forward that her metabolism will actually slow as she ages. So we just need to know that. And I think part of the some of the studies that are being done, like the natural history study, will hopefully start showing us maybe we don't need to worry as much about growth when our kids are little as we thought. What we do know is that our kids get older as they hit adolescence. One of their biggest health risks is obesity, and another one is the return of reflux. And we will get into a discussion about reflux in a minute when we talk about pain. Yes, next one. All right, so GI tract and diet. So take a look at this here. Chris Oliver is a fantastic researcher out of England who compared appetite issues in children and adolescents with Angelman syndrome to individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome. And on several measures, people with Angelman syndrome have the same food obsessions as people with Prader-Willi. So if your child already has really unusually high interest in food and is very preoccupied by food and it's becoming an issue, really check out the information on Prader-Willi. Maggie's original diagnosis was Prader-Willi syndrome, just because they forgot to do the additional test. Prader-Willi syndrome families know how to manage food obsessions. There's so much information out there about how to treat it. A lot of our kids, especially our adolescents, have Prader-Willi syndrome-like traits when it comes to food. We also have to really be aware of seizure treatments that affect appetite and weight. Probably the single most diagnosed treatment for epilepsy in our kids is valproic acid. You might call it Epilim, you might call it Depakote, but valproic acid. It is known to increase weight and increase appetite. So if that's an issue for your child, you just really need to know that and make sure that that's being monitored. In contrast, Topamax is a common one, Zerontin, it's also called ethosuximide, I think, often cause nausea or stomach upset or lack of appetite. So if a child is very thin and refusing food, just make sure that it's not the medication that could be contributing to that. I put ketogenic diet here. In Maggie's case, Maggie's considered anorexic because she won't eat. The ketogenic diet is one of the only things that's actually normalized her appetite, so it's very unusual that when she's on the diet, in many ways her appetite goes up, which tells us that her lack of appetite is directly related to her nervous system. It's not that there's something wrong with her stomach, it's that there's what's going on in her brain. And it's the nerves in her stomach, which is very likely what's going on with the number of our kids who never seem to feel full. Their mouths don't feel full, their stomachs don't feel full, they're always hungry. It's going on in their brains. We just need to know that. It's been very interesting to us to see that we can treat Maggie's appetite in some ways by treating her epilepsy. And lastly, I put the low glycemic index treatment in. This is a form of seizure treatment that is like the South Beach diet. It is a diet that dramatically restricts simple carbohydrates, sugar, white flour, white rice, foods like that. It has, in a small study that was published last year, Dr. Ronald Tibert out of Boston led that. The full study is on the Angelman Syndrome Foundation website. And kids with Angelman syndrome had an unusually strong response to this treatment. This is a treatment that is healthy over the lifespan, and it sets healthy eating habits from the beginning. It's healthy for an entire family to eat. We know families who, I've had a few families actually ask me, well, my family, we don't eat any white flour. We don't eat any sugar, and my kid's 5 and doesn't have epilepsy, and she's deletion positive. Do you think it could be related? We don't know. We need to do some research, but we know that withdrawing simple carbohydrates like sugar, white flour, those sorts of things, pasta, can treat seizures without side effects. And if it also helps us with the appetite issues, all the better. And lastly, I put reflux, gagging, and vomiting. Our kids, part of their biology often causes pretty severe reflux. I know Maggie's got quite severe reflux. As a baby, she would just sort of effortlessly vomit fairly regularly. And that hypersensitivity of the nerves in the guts can also cause kids to start gagging. It can cause kids to vomit. Maggie's got cyclic vomiting, which is common in a certain percentage of our kids. Again, this is how her nervous system affects her stomach, but what we really need to be aware of is how these biological issues, like gagging and vomiting, can actually play out once you get into a classroom. So kids might have reflux. They might have very sensitive sense of smell. They might have a very sensitive stomach, and certain things make them gag. Well, guess what happens when a kid gags? Everybody goes, whoa! Whatever you were trying to make them do, you just stopped, right? If they vomit, oh, now people really stop trying to get them to do anything. And this biological issue of gagging can become a learned behavior of using gagging and vomiting to make other people stop doing things to you. And once it is a learned behavior, it is very difficult to unlearn. So if that is an issue for your child, Chris Oliver's research and his website is a phenomenal resource, and I would really check it out. Sleep. I think all of us know as parents, especially if our kid has the sleep disorder, that our attention and our behavior, our patience, our impulse control are dramatically affected by sleep. A 2009 study, the reference is up here, showed that the sleep disorder in Angelman is often very closely related to the epilepsy in Angelman. If our children are sleep deprived, it's very difficult for them to go into school and learn the way they need to, just like it's very difficult for us to go into work and work the way that we need to. So sleep should be a serious issue. And if your pediatrician or if your doctors are saying, oh, but every little kid doesn't sleep, or, well, I've heard that kids with Angelman don't need as much sleep, just really make sure that you're trying to get sleep really evaluated and taken seriously, because it can dramatically affect our children's ability to learn. We know that it can affect their absenteeism from school. We know it causes us to be a lot more exhausted and not to have the energy to meet our kids' needs the way that they want to. And there was very exciting research just published, Allen et al., I think I forgot to put the PubMed link in, but we can post that, showing that really well done sleep training can actually teach kids with Angelman syndrome how to sleep and how to put themselves back to sleep. Now, what this study showed was kind of the usual things you might do with a toddler without a sleep behavior expert to help you really may not work. But a very well-organized study giving families lots of support and lots of sleep expertise actually taught every child in their study how to sleep through the night. So it's possible. There's also medications you can ask on Angelman syndrome, Angelman syndrome listservs, that kind of stuff, what kinds of medications people use. But really, teaching our kids how to sleep without medication should be the gold standard we're all trying to get to. We have not gotten there yet, but we know with Maggie that sleep is absolutely essential to everything else that follows. She simply cannot learn without sleep. This is the sleep page from those Discern Clinical Management Guidelines. You'll notice at the top I highlighted where it says, many children do not show the usual signs of sleep deprivation that we would see in adults. Instead, in response to being sleep deprived, they become more active and demonstrate more challenging behaviors. And studies on sleep and Angelman syndrome have shown that parents report much better behaved children when their kids are rested. So keep that in mind. If your child is one of those who doesn't sleep and has challenging behavior, maybe addressing the sleep more than the behavior might make a big difference. One of the things I highlighted here as the cause of poor sleep is pain and reflux. Because I think I often hear families coming up with all kinds of strategies. We all use whatever we can get to try to get our kids to sleep. But we really have to make sure that we're addressing any potential cause of pain, and I'll get to the pain issue in a minute. But these clinical care guidelines really help lay out some of the things that we need to try to do. And if this doesn't work, the study I referenced earlier, you can Google that citation and Sleep with Angelman and get some very specific ideas about what they did that taught kids with Angelman how to sleep. All right, next issue is pain. I think this is a personal one for me because it's come up a lot with Maggie. Maggie, I think, as part of her sensory issues, was just very unusually sensitive to a lot of pain issues. So for example, she had mild eczema, but it was enough that she would actually scratch herself bleeding at night. It's the kind of thing where you can have a toothache or an earache or a headache during the day and you can sort of block it out, but at night when you're laying there trying to fall asleep, that's all you can think about, that mosquito bite, whatever it is. When our kids are experiencing pain, it can be incredibly disruptive to their ability to sleep and their ability to do a number of things. And again, Chris Oliver has done a lot of research on children with a variety of syndromes to figure out what is challenging behavior and what is kids actually expressing pain. So if we know, for example, that kids with Angelman syndrome are at high risk of reflux. In my daughter's case, we didn't think she had reflux because she had stopped spitting up. We didn't see anything, we didn't smell anything, we didn't think she had reflux until she did something called a 24-hour pH probe, where they put something down into her stomach and showed that for 2 hours every night she had intense heartburn. Move over. We would not have known that without the study. And it was just because we had a really proactive pediatrician who said, well, let's just see if this is part of why she's crying at night. Turned out she was actually in pain. It would have been very easy to interpret it as behavior. Maggie's just refusing to sleep. We need to be aggressive at investigating pain in our kids because they often don't express it in a way that makes it obvious that that's what's going on. And again, Chris Oliver's research, if you think your child is experiencing pain, he's got some amazing PowerPoints and resources to help you sort that out. So, but the major way that children who don't speak express pain is often self-injurious behavior, meaning they hurt themselves. And if a child is hurting herself, regardless of what you are doing, if it occurs more often when she's alone and you're not there to witness it, such as when she's falling asleep, it's highly likely that that's pain. Highly likely. So if I hit myself and you come over and say, stop, well, oh, interesting. Stop, right? That actually might be teaching me, oh, wow, I can really get people's attention when I hit myself. That will increase when I'm getting attention. But if I'm hitting myself by myself in my bedroom when I'm falling asleep, very likely I'm actually experiencing pain. We know that people with epilepsy are a much higher risk of having migraines and severe headaches than people without. We know that many epilepsy medications cause severe headaches in people who take them. Our kids can't talk, so we have to watch for how they might be hurting themselves when they're alone, because that actually might be the major way that they're expressing pain. And there's something called pain gating. Go ahead and I think go to the next slide. So if you have a chronic pain, let's say I have a migraine, if I beat on my head, I cause a new sensation. And there's something called pain gating, where really your brain can only interpret one pain signal at a time. And I can block the sensation of the migraine for that moment that I'm beating my head. And it's actually less painful than the migraine, so I might continue to do it. Children who beat their heads often have migraines as the cause. And what they're doing is they're doing something called pain gating. This is just a slide from Chris Oliver. His whole presentation is this URL at the top. And so I can use one physical sensation, such as rubbing my stomach really hard, like Maggie used to do. She'd actually cause herself to bleed. She'd scratch her stomach so hard. That hurt less than the pain from her reflux. So she had reflux, and she would cause herself pain from scratching because the pain from scratching was less than the pain from her reflux. And she'd rather have the pain from scratching herself that hard. So when our kids are hurting themselves, we have to think pain. Yeah.
Just from another point of view, what children are doing when they're pain gating in adults, if I'm hitting my head, the pain might not be coming from my head. And that's really important for caregivers and parents to know. Sometimes I might be biting my finger and rocking. My AFOs might be too tight. Because our children and adults have sensory processing issues and the sensory system and the pain signals are getting all wonky, yes, Billy's nodding his head, then I might be doing, no, he's shaking his head now. Sorry, Billy. I might be doing something that I can easily access. If I'm in my chair and I'm strapped down and the only thing that I can do is bite my lip or bang my head on my headrest or bite my thumb, that's what I'm going to do, because that pain is less than whatever pain I'm feeling in my body. And for the children that I work with who are quite competent communicators, they have often told me, I feel sick. And it is clear that they are in pain because either they've got a terrible toothache or they've got teeth coming through or they've got a broken limb, but they say, I feel sick. And I have spent many, many months trying to teach the difference between feeling sick, like, I'm going to vomit, or feeling like I've got pain. And they are adamant, no, it's not pain, I feel sick. So I need to respect that and say, okay, I know that things in your brain and your nervous system and your sensory system are a bit wonky. For you, you feel sick. I'm so pleased that you can tell me that. What I need to then say is, this is how I can help you. If you feel this way, I need to give you strategies so that you can ask me for what you need. But please just remember that if your child is doing this or banging his head and it's not happening to get attention, if it stops when you leave the room, then that's attention. If it keeps going and it escalates at night when he's in his bed and he's trying to bang his head against the side rails of his bed, then that's pain. And it might not be in his head. So then we need to start problem solving. And Chris Oliver has done some brilliant research on this, and he's got a challenging behaviour DVD that explains this really well. But sometimes really hitting home to the classroom teacher that when I bite my thumb, don't put my arm wraps on, don't stop me, it might not be a challenging behaviour. Okay? Keep going.
This is just a second slide from Chris Oliver, and just what it's showing is we really learn that hurting ourselves makes the pain go away, and we'll see more and more and more of it. So the more that a child is doing something like what Mary-Louise described, the more that we can see the cycle of self-injury increasing. Go ahead. All right, so that's pain gating. And there's a very chicken and egg relationship with behavior, right? That if I have a headache and I'm doing something in response to the headache and everyone around me stops doing what they were doing because I'm now doing whatever I'm doing, then I learn I can influence the behavior of people around me by doing that. And then it gets very, very difficult to sort out what's the pain and what's the behavior. And I think the major lesson I take from Chris Oliver's work is better to intervene early when we see the first signs of pain than to try to unteach that down the road, when you really have to try to sort it out in terms of its response and behavior. I think this is actually, again, Chris Oliver's slide. I don't think you can actually read his little URL down here. But again, it's just showing that once a behavior has occurred a number of times, it can acquire a function where it's actually now useful to the child. So what was once a response to a certain pain now actually becomes a functional way of getting other people to do something different. It can become social, it can become communicative. Either way, we can expect it's going to get worse over time and it's going to be difficult to unlearn. So we really need to address these things as soon as they start. Okay, so we just covered those things. We need to figure out how to identify our child's pain signature. And what I mean by that is our child probably does something different when it's pain than when it's something else. So in my daughter's case, she is not a kid who likes to make eye contact. She generally, so it's one of the reasons she's considered autistic, she doesn't make a lot of eye contact. When she's in pain, she makes intense eye contact. She grabs my hair. When she had migraines, she would grab my hair on both sides of my face and just scream into my face, making eye contact that close, right? She was very, very good at expressing pain. So when I see eye contact from Maggie, intense eye contact combined with really urgent vocalizations, and when she grabs my face, I know that that's pain. Whereas with Maggie, when it's seizures, her eye gaze decreases. The vocalizations might be the same, the franticness might be the same, but instead of directing it right at my face, when Maggie's about to seize, she'll actually walk all over the place. She's very restless and she's very anxious. She's not directing it at me. She's not saying, come, please help me with this. She'll walk around. She can't stop herself. And she has a very flat affect when she's about to seize. So if she's frantic in my face, grabbing my hair, she's got pain and she's asking for help. When she's not looking at me and her face has gone flat, but she's frantic, that's actually a way that she's telling me that she has a seizure. And so we can really observe our kids and learn their seizure signatures, their pain signatures. We have something we call the Maggiepedia, where we've tried to really record this and be very intentional so that we can teach her pain signature to other people. We encourage her aide at school and the teachers at school to write down the patterns that they notice and really document it well, because these are just such important things that we need to learn about our kids. There's also this idea that individuals with Angelman syndrome have a very high pain threshold. I'm highly skeptical of that because our kids have an enormous communication disability, which makes it very difficult to express a whole lot of things. And what I've seen with Maggie is I think it's very difficult to express pain. So it might appear to be a high pain threshold. She has low bone density and she's had 5 fractures. It's very difficult for her to express pain. So when she's expressing pain, it's bad. And like Mary-Louise said, Maggie has fractured her wrist twice. And so, I forget now which wrist. So one time she fell during a seizure very hard. She had a myoclonic seizure, fell very hard, and was grabbing her wrist and screaming. Okay, classic, right? She's broken her wrist again. Take her to emergency room, they x-ray, there's no fracture. I'm like, she's telling you she's got a fracture. I know she's got a fracture because look at how she's screaming. X-ray's good, but they finally put a cast on her, they sent her home. She was in worse pain. It was clear she was in horrible pain. We took her back the next day. She's clutching her wrist so hard. Fracture was right up here. I don't know if she remembered her previous fractures and therefore remembered this pain here, and it's just like this pain, but the pain was in a completely different spot. It was the humerus, it wasn't the wrist. So when our kids are expressing pain, we have to go another step. We have to go another step than we would with another child. Lastly, epilepsy. I think lastly for me. Go ahead and turn the page. What these Angelman Syndrome clinical management guidelines did was really highlight the kinds of seizures that happen in our kids with Angelman that are uncommon in the general population, but very common in our kids. So absence seizures and atypical absence, the sort of staring spell that goes on longer, maybe the staring spell that's accompanied by a little mouth movement or a little eye movement. Myoclonic jerks, that real fast, for Maggie as an infant, she had that really pronounced startle reflex, and as she got older, it was so bad that as she learned how to stand, she'd go flying back on her head. If you put her in a sitting position, she'd suddenly go flying back on her head. Those were actually myoclonic seizures. We had no idea. Myoclonics can actually be repetitive. And at an Angelman conference, I met a little girl doing this. And I just went up to her mom and I said, "You gotten that looked at?" And she's like, "Yeah, neurologist says it's a tremor." That's not a tremor. That's not what our kids' tremors look like. That is not a tremor. She was actually hospitalized right there at that conference. She was in myoclonic status. There's a really great video. It's linked on the ASF website, interviewing Ronald Tiebert about the difference between tremor in our kids and myoclonic status. And what he describes as being one of the major differences is that if the tremor comes for a few hours and then goes away, it's much more likely epileptic. So what's common in our kids, the most common is, "Oh my gosh, there's my lunch." And my hand tremors as I reach for it, right? I'm excited, I have this intention tremor. But something that comes for a few hours and often has some reduction in my level of awareness, in my personality. I seem kind of flat. I just don't seem as engaged. I'm not paying attention, and I have a tremor. That might very well be epileptic. And this is very difficult to see on EEG because it's a form of seizure that happens so deep in the brain. When you have an EEG, you've got these electrodes on the outside of your head measuring brain activity. So seizures that happen right under your skull are the easiest to capture. Seizures that happen deep in your brain are the hardest to capture because that electricity has to go all the way through your brain to come to the surface where it can be detected. So if you think that your child is seizing, get a second opinion. I'm a big fan of Ronald Tiebert in Boston, just because he has so carefully studied epilepsy and Angelman syndrome, he and Elizabeth Teal. And lastly, non-convulsive status. So non-convulsive status is a form of seizure that occurs in less than 1% of people who have epilepsy. It's not something that a neurologist is going to treat very often. In our kids, depending on the research you look at, 50 to 90% of our kids go into non-convulsive status. Maggie has been in non-convulsive status many times. What often happens with Maggie is she just becomes very flat. She's just not herself. Her balance is off. Maybe she sort of walks like she's drunk. It's changed over time. And we might see some seizures. She might have a seizure and we give her medication and it stops and she's herself, and then she kind of goes back downhill again. She's actually having a constant form of low-level seizure called non-convulsive status. Regression is not part of Angelman syndrome. If your child loses skills, if they are regressing, it is very likely non-convulsive status. Regression is not part of Angelman. Our children do not have a progressive disorder. So if they lose skills, if they lose their balance, if they lose abilities, suspect epilepsy.
As a teacher, most of the children that enter the class, the nurses will say, okay, this is this type of seizure, this is what a tonic-clonic looks like, this is what an absence looks like, this is what a myoclonic looks like. Non-convulsive status, your teacher might have no idea. A lot of parents have no idea, but this one can be huge for a teacher. When a child is spending 7 to 8 hours a day in that classroom, if that teacher knows to look out for little subtle changes or big changes in a child and can feed that back to a parent, that's really, really important. Being in a classroom with children is about more than he had a BM, he said more, and he walked a step. It's about, wow, what did your child learn today? How did they interact? How much did they love learning? Something's not right, I'm a bit concerned. So non-convulsive status is a really important thing for whoever's in your child's life. If they start to say, he's just not the kid he was a month ago. He's snoozing more, he's just disorganised. That can be a really powerful thing to say, yep, we need to get this looked at. because when a teacher thinks of seizures, they think of the kid going clonk and going into full-on tonic-clonic status and going on the wall for the nurse. When they start to learn about all these other little seizures that can happen and how they actually affect learning, that this is a child's learning. A kid can't learn when he's in status. And you're there as a teacher to ensure that he has the best opportunities and that he is in the best state for learning. He can't do that if he's in status. So I'd really push for everyone in your child's environment. If he's a type of child or she's a young adult who's going off to work and things are just changing, think about educating the people in your child's life about non-convulsive status. Is this me next?
Almost. Oh, I forgot about this one. This is just a tool that we made for Maggie. We call it the spectrum of Maggie. So Maggie's baseline is she is cheerful, curious, and relaxed. I actually think if you Google spectrum of Maggie, this comes up. It's kind of funny. She's calm and she's steady, she's amused, she's curious, she's interested. She has a broad range of emotions. You see things flicker across her face. You can really tell that she's observing things. She responds quickly to instructions and comments, even though she might very well be ignoring you, and she's smiling while she ignores you. Doesn't tend to mouth things a lot, makes moments of intense eye contact, but just moments, and has a very relaxed gait. When she's a 10, when she's over here, Maggie at a perfect 10, she has her arms swing and she's just very relaxed. Her vision seems strong, and if she has anything like hair pulling, it's this very sort of cheerful teasing. When Maggie's in non-convulsive status, the keywords are manic, frantic, and tense. She has a very manic body and it's very tight, and her hands are often crossed like this. So we've seen this from her. Loud manic laughter. Oh, sorry. Loud manic laughter that she cannot seem to control. Once she laughed for 11 hours straight. Very limited range of emotion. She's either manic, or she's almost asleep, or she's intensely crying, with almost nothing in the middle. Doesn't seem to respond to things, has this really frantic oral need, limited eye contact, this kind of thing. This is Maggie's seizure signature. This is a tool they have at school. Go ahead and turn the page. I think the second page might be there. Where there's 3 blocks in the day, and her EA just makes a note. Today, Maggie was sort of an 8. Or in the morning, she was an 8. In the afternoon, she was a 7. In the afternoon, she was a 7, but the next morning, she's a 9. And we watch for a pattern of the numbers dropping down. So this is just a tool that we use with Maggie, that we've used with her team, and it's sort of our shorthand for how organized she is and how high risk she is for having seizures. When she's in the blue zone, she is an awesome student. She's ready to learn. She's ready to be challenged. She's taking stuff in. This is the time to assess her. This is the time to teach her. This is the time to really engage her. And when she's down there, you need to send her home, and we need to focus on her biology right now because she's not in any place to learn. Okay, so epilepsy. So non-convulsive status, I just really want to make sure that people are learning about that. The kindling theory, I threw this out there because there's a number of neurologists who still kind of subscribe to this idea that having those little seizures, those little petit mal seizures, is not really a big deal. Unless the child's on the ground convulsing, let's be conservative. We don't want to over-medicate. And there's definitely an argument for that, because I think our kids, next to being at risk for not having their seizures treated, their next risk is being over-medicated. Right? So it's a very tight line, but there's something called the kindling theory of epilepsy, which is that when your brain cells are seizing a little bit, it's sort of like kindling. And once you teach those brain cells to keep seizing a little bit, they seize more and they seize more and they seize more. And we're actually creating pathways in our kids' brains where all their brains know how to do is to seize. So with Maggie, we've been much more aggressive about her seizure treatment, and we've sought out neurologists who say, no, our goal is seizure freedom. Our goal is not, well, let's just make sure she's only seizing a little bit. Definitely with our kids, when they are seizing, that post-ictal, that post-seizure recovery time leads to absenteeism. So again, it really impacts their learning. are the treatments that we use to try to prevent our kids' seizures. Here's some of the most common side effects. If you just look at all of our kids' meds that they're on, some of the most common side effects are fatigue, irritability, hypotonia, which is low muscle tone, cognitive side effects such as feeling really cloudy and fuzzy in the brain, and feeling tired. So every single one of those can really impact how our kids are in the classroom. We just have to be very aware of that and keep seeking the seizure treatments with ideally no side effects. And then again, I just wanted to mention again the low glycemic index treatment. It is the only seizure treatment I have seen that is not associated with side effects for our kids. So know you've got that out there. Consider it when the time comes, if the time comes. Go ahead. All right, and now Mary-Louise.
Yeah, so just a quick question. So what we're going to do is move on to communication, because after that we're going to do questions and answers, unless there's something you really need clarified about what Erin just said. And the last thing is, someone told me I should tell you who I am, which doesn't really matter because I'm not telling you anything important. But I'm Becky Burdine, and I am the Chief Science Officer of FAST. So if you have any questions about that, thank you. You can find me later. All right, so now communication and Mary-Louise.
Oh, not yet.
Oh, not yet,
Sorry,
okay.
I'm
jumping the gun.
Desperate to get onto communication.
Yeah.
Am I on? Yes. I know people are desperate to get onto communication because the first thing people come up and they, into my face, oh my God, you're the angel whisperer. You can help. But first we have to understand about the other stuff. As long as he's happy is what really irritates me about education for people with Angelman syndrome. Yes, some of our children have passivity, some are assertive, some have severe anxiety, some have a very strong will, some get obsessed, have intense personal interests, some are extroverts, some are introverts. Again, they are your children more than they are Angelman. The laughter, someone just posted on the Ustream that when the child starts laughing and the person who's so excited that they're with this really happy kid keeps it going, and then the kid gets more and more and more and more and more, and then the parent needs to go, okay, we need to bring this right back down. And it might take half an hour to bring it right back down. Your child's teacher needs to know that, and your child's speech therapist needs to know that just because he's laughing at you doesn't mean you're the best person in the world. Okay? He's not super excited to be here. He wants to engage with you, but that doesn't mean that you do bubbles and switch toys every time you come in because the last time he laughed. Okay? Children need to learn how to turn off that laugh, how to calm themselves down so they can get to that higher order cognitive stuff. And that takes explicit teaching sometimes. Using things like, I calm myself down, I turn my laugh off, being very calm. Some children need to learn to go and sit away for a bit and then come back. If staff read, if they Google Angelman syndrome and think, oh, happy kids, I'm so glad. Oh, I've got the happiest kid in my class. It's wonderful. She just brightens my day. That's great. But you know what? She's there to learn just as much as the kids who aren't as happy. The sociability and the eye contact is so powerful for people with Angelman syndrome, and this is often where the challenging behaviours come in. For some people, it's that my child wants to greet everyone they see, and they go up and they pull that person into their face. For others, it's, well, I had all these other strategies. I used to touch you gently, but you didn't do anything. I used to pat you on the shoulder to get your attention, but nothing happened. So now, the only thing that you respond to is when I grab your hair, because the first thing you do is turn and look at me and say no. And I go, yes. That was a really good reaction. Or I grab your face and I turn it right into mine. That's powerful stuff. So what we need to teach the children is appropriate ways of getting attention. Wow, you have a voice. You can use your voice to call out. You can vocalise. You could try and push a laugh out to get your voice going. Yes, when you touch me, that's your way of saying, oh, I've got something to say to you. Now, if your child is a hair yanker, turner, you need to make sure that everyone in your child's life, if you're starting an intervention that says, from now on, we are going to respond to every tiny initiation of communication. Every time my child taps my arm, looks at me out the corner of my eye, I'm going to say, wow, do you have something to say to me? Because it's going to take Nana totally changing her attitude. It's going to take the neighbours and the teachers. Everyone has to be consistent. That the first time your child touches someone on the arm, that person turns straight away and knows exactly what you want them to say. Wow, oh, hello Simon, how are you? You touched me on my arm. I'm not talking about quiet hands. I'm not talking about any of the ABA stuff. I'm talking about teaching our children to respect their own space and the space of others. Because communication, happy demeanour, challenging behaviours affects relationships. And what most of us, if not all of us, want for our sons and daughters and our students and the people we work with is really, really rich relationships. And we can't have rich relationships with people if everyone in that child's life is petrified of them. So what you've got to teach is, yes, oh, I'm really pleased to see you. And if you see Simon coming from the other side of that room and you know that he's a hugger, but that he is now 22 years old, and it was cute when he was hugging when he was 5, but now he's 6 foot tall, and he can actually pretty much crush every rib, you are going to stand there with your hand out. Hi, Simon, it's great to meet you. Yeah, or high five. Waving's really hard as a greeting because A, I have to think about my hand in space, but also I'm not getting anything out of it. A high five, I get really hard sensory feedback. I get to touch you. I get to look in your face. So a high five is sometimes more powerful. And one thing about the sociability, I think we can all agree is that people with Angelman have extremely fantastic receptive communication. They understand everything. So what really affects a child's social development is when the mum or the teacher is with that child and someone new comes in and the first thing the adult says, watch out, he's a biter. He's going to bite you. Careful, he pulls hair. Because that kid's going, yeah, I pull hair. I rock. That's what I do. That's how I say hello. I'm the hair puller. What I see sometimes is he's going to bite you, he's going to bite you, he's going to bite you. And the kid's like, yeah, I'm going to bite you. And I was like, stop telling him he's going to bite me. I'm quite confident to say, you can say hello to me with your voice. You can use your hands. Or if you want to kiss me, you can kiss me with your mouth closed, like that. And I can intervene, but it takes skill. But the child is looking to you as his key person to be the someone that interprets for him, that interprets his behaviour for other people, and that introduces him to the world. And if he is always introduced as the biter, the hair puller, the happy flappy kid, that's who he's going to become. Some of our children have really, really difficult, challenging behaviours. They really struggle with understanding the world and the world understanding them. And I want to talk about that a bit more later in regards to communication. The self-injury and aggression is powerful here, but again, we can address that with communication. So can you just go to the next slide, please, Erin? I want to quickly go through this. I know it's important. Who feels they have a really clear understanding of what sensory processing issues are? Well, that breaks my heart because your kid's got it, okay? Sensory processing issues. We all know about the senses of sight, taste, touch, smell, hearing. When we're filling out the worksheet in grade 4, list the 5 senses, and we colour in the eyes and colour in the ears. And there's also the other senses, proprioceptive. How I feel about my body and how it moves. And that this sensory information is coming from the connections between the muscles and the fibres and between the joints. When my joints are compressed, I'm getting proprioceptive feedback. The kids who have proprioceptive processing issues are the ones who squeeze themselves into boxes, who love being wrapped up tight in sheets, who want the really rough bear hugs. They're the kids that really crave this. They're not getting enough information from all their fibres, so the information has to be really, really, really strong in order for it to make sense. So what I really want to hit home is that when your sensory processing issues are all out of whack, they are all consuming. I cannot even begin to think about learning to read or write or use my voice to communicate or nod my head if my whole body feels wonky in space, nothing makes sense, because this stuff is the groundwork. And I can't get to that higher order cognitive functioning until all this stuff is sorted. There are children with vestibular issues. That's all about your inner ear. So these are the children who have balance issues, who rock when they're thinking or listening. Some of the children can see better when they're rocking. Some of the children can see better when they're swinging. Some of the children, their vision totally disappears when they're rocking, and they stop. And then they'll start again. It is extremely sensitive. And these are the kids that when you put them on a slide at the park, because the whole class has gone to the park and you think the park's a great thing to do, and you put them down the slide, and they have a mega freak out. Because not only have they gone through space, but their inner ear has gone, they have no proprioceptive feedback, and you've basically told their body to totally Control-Alt-Delete and start again. And that is insanely frightening for them. It's these children with vestibular issues that can get gravitational insecurity. And that means that I have no idea where I am in space, and I am petrified. And if you touch me, I'm going to headbang you, because I know where I am. If you try and make me walk, if you sit behind me, and I don't know where you're going to grab my hand and do hand over hand, I'm going to headbang you because I need to protect this. They literally do not know what is going to happen next, and they freak out. It's not a challenging behaviour when it starts, but it can become one. So you need to understand that there is more going on in your child's system than a challenging behaviour. Is this starting to make sense? Can you see your kid when I'm talking about things like this? For some children, they're the wriggly, jiggly kids. They can never sit still. Their body's always doing this. But Dad lies on top of them and does WWF, and suddenly you get this 5 seconds of, "Hi!" And they start babbling. And they go, "Oh my goodness, I'm here. Talk to me, read me a story, do something." You've got about 5 seconds and then they're gone. I've had students who have shoved themselves into bookshelves during maths because they know what works. These are the kids that really like weighted blankets, compression vests. Stick them in a life jacket on a boat and they are in heaven, because suddenly they can see, they've got water, they've got movement. Sorry, man's just telling me to move. That suddenly makes sense to them, okay? Perseveration. That's when the kids, they're the kids that go, I'm perseverating on this sensation, or they're the kids that when you give them a switch, they go bang, 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 bang. Okay, that's not a challenging behaviour, that's perseveration. I'm bang, 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 bang. Because the first thing we do when we give kids a switch is say, hit the switch. So they are. We never actually tell them, don't hit the switch. Only hit the switch when you want to say something. Suddenly this switch goes around the class and you go, hit the switch, boom. So when I've got this switch in front of me, I'm going to go bang, 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 bang. That's what my sensory system's telling me, plus my learned behaviour of you telling me to hit the switch. The movement of perseveration, when the children are doing this, it's gravitational insecurity, vestibular needs, and I'm going to keep doing it because it's really good. And that's how I understand my world. And it probably doesn't look very good on the Ustream. People probably go, oh my God, what is going on? There's also the autonomic nervous system when we talk about sensory processing. The children who find it really hard to regulate their own body temperature, who will suddenly get calm, weird feelings, and you can look more on that. I'll give you some more information. There are lots and lots of tools for sensory integration. An occupational therapist is the person you want to talk to, but you want to say to them, my child has sensory processing issues, can you help? If not, you need to find someone to help me, or you need to go and look at what I need, because it is your job as my child's occupational therapist. This is in your field. This is what I need from you. Because until this is dealt with, I can't even begin to support my child to become a literate and competent communicator. If you just go to the next page, please, Erin. Okay, the Sensory Processing Disorder Foundation, SPD Foundation, has a magnificent website. It has lots of webinars, conferences. It often has PowerPoints and visual. There's things where you go as an avatar and you go into different rooms and it teaches you different things. And for a teacher or an OT, it's very accessible, but it's also accessible for parents. What you want your occupational therapist to do, and what you want you and your husband or your wife or your carers to do, is to think about doing a sensory profile on your child. This is what will tell you where your child needs help and what kind of interventions to go in for. The Out of Sync Child is a brilliant resource. The Out of Sync Child has books. Carol Stock-Kranowitz has an amazing website. So if your child's one of these kids that is really, really sensory obsessed or has very low sensory things, is very quiet and calm and needs a lot of oomph before they come up, this is the book that'll help you. And there's also Gene Ayres, but these will be on the website. Next. Okay. I want to talk about vision, because a lot of the children with Angelman get told the child has albinism. And that might be the case, but albinism is usually a genetic condition. Certainly the children can have hypopigmentation, that's part of Angelman for many children, but it's the cortical vision impairment that many of our children need to be addressed. Cortical vision impairment means my eyes are fine, but how my brain processes vision, that's where the brain is, where the problem is. The problem is in my brain, not my eyes. So putting glasses on isn't going to help. The problem is in my brain. These are the kids that have issues with depth perception. When I come to a shadow, I start doing this because to me it might be a 17-foot drop. I can't tell the difference between a shadow and falling off a cliff. So I'm just going to put my foot there to double check. Cortical vision impairment, because it's in the brain, it changes all the time. the brain is built on patterns. So when a child with cortical vision impairment is asked to choose between two objects, and these objects change all the time, I'm not making any patterns in my brain. If the symbols on my communication board fly in and fly out, and sometimes they're over here and sometimes they're over there, I can't make any patterns in my brain. Visual discrimination, sometimes we're asking the children to show me the red one. Well, it might not look red to me. It might not look like the same ball as that blue one. It might be blurry. I might not be able to see out that side of my eyes today. Some people with cortical vision impairment describe it as looking through Swiss cheese, but the places where the holes are change every day. So for many of the children, that's why you'll see them either do a quick flick out the corner of their eye. If you've got sensory processing issues and cortical vision impairment, it is okay that you cannot look and listen at the same time. The cruelest thing we can do to many of our children is to say, look at me and listen, because you are asking for two terribly complex things. You need to decide, do you want the child to look at what you've got, or do you want them to listen? Because for many children, if they're listening to a story, they're not looking. They'll look at the pictures, then when you start reading, they'll look away. And if you start saying, look at the pictures, their hearing's gone. They can only process one thing at a time. We can work on integrating those things, but if you're seeing a child who, when you're talking to them, needs to turn away or gazes up at the lights, they're trying to shut off their vision so they can concentrate. Kids do what works for them. Our children have the most amazing strategies, and we beat it out of them by saying, in our white Western way, look at me. Well, you know what? If I'm wanting you to work on rhyming words, I actually don't care if you're looking at me, because I'm working on your auditory discrimination. So it's okay not to look and listen at the same time. Nystagmus, strabismus, I'm sure everyone's either dealt with that or knows a child with Angelman who's dealing with that. Keeping glasses on, I'm not the person to talk to about that. I know that if you post on Facebook, on the listserv, and you say, how can I help my child keep glasses on, you will get 50,000 responses and probably 50,000 different ideas. But again, each child is different and you can take what works for you. John Costello is at Boston. He is one of the leaders in cortical vision impairment. And Linda Burkhart is a teacher and a communication, augmentative communication presenter, and she works with a lot of children with cortical vision impairment. So those are the two people that you really need to know about if your child's dealing with CVI or cortical vision impairment. And motor planning. Have a bit of a wriggle, find your body in space, you might have a numb bottom. If you've got sensory processing issues and you don't have very good body awareness, it's very difficult for you to sit still. For many of our children, their hand will come in front of their face and they're like, oh, what was that? That, if a child does that, people say, low cognitive functioning. They're like, no, it's just that this happens so fleetingly and nobody has ever taught me what this thing is or how to get it to happen more and more, that I have no idea what this is. Because the only time I use these is when someone else grabs it and does something with it. And that's called hand over hand. Depth perception. Again, we're looking at stomping. I reach for something, I think it's over there, but really it's right here. Or I swipe it off because I muck everything up. Again, it's in my brain and my sensory system. It's not my intellect. It has nothing to do with your child's intellect. It is about neurology. hit that home to the teacher. What you are seeing is neurology and sensory stuff. This is not intellect. So you cannot judge intellect on this. Balance, lots of balance issues, hand-eye coordination, we have to teach. You're reaching for that. You're stretching your arm out and reaching. Look, your hand's nearly there. It's really close. If you stretch your fingers, I bet you can grab that toy. And the kids are like, oh, what are you talking about? This is where the hand-eye coordination, body awareness, if your child is still in pull-ups or nappies or diapers, you have 5 or 6 times a day where you have brilliant opportunities to talk about legs, feet, standing, sitting, keeping still, moving body parts, and you are hitting home the same language all the time. I need you to stand at the bench, standing on your legs, shifting weight. Oh, that's it, going to bend my leg and lift my leg up. Yeah, that's it. We're going to push down your pull-ups with your hands. You can use your fingers to push your pull-ups down. You've got all this language about body awareness and your child's body so they can get some ownership over their body. Because unless you use this language, they're not going to learn it. They may not learn through osmosis when people say, you've got such beautiful hair. They're like, but when I say, brush your hair, yeah, I know what the brush is. It feels really good in my mouth. Brushing hair is horrible because that's when Mum pulls my hair. But hair is hair on a dog, hair on a doll. I need to map that word hair onto everything. When I'm playing with a doll, oh, you're going to put the diaper on the doll. Yes, she's going to lie still. We're going to put the diaper on her bottom. Oh, now she needs her trousers on. Let's pull them up her legs, just like we do with your legs. Yeah, that's right. She might need to bend and stretch. Oh, she's a doll. She can't bend and stretch. We'll just pull them on. All these things, all through your child's day. Language, language, language. For communication to come out, you have to invest some serious language going in. More and finish does not work with this. Fine motor manipulation, very, very, very tricky for some children. If your child has brilliant fine motor, that's brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Your kid is probably the one that everyone else goes, oh, he's so high functioning. I wish my kid could do that. They don't know that you might have spent 47 hours a week doing OT to do that one particular thing, and that's the one particular thing he can do with his fingers. You just got to celebrate it. All the kids have different strengths and different challenges. Intentional movement and associated movement is really important, and then I'm going to move on. When a therapist knows a lot about intentional movement, this is when people go, oh my God, she's psychic. Because a really good therapist, and usually parents, can tell the difference between when I do this with my hand, that's my intentional movement. But what happens is that all this comes in. I've got my intentional movement and then all my associated movements that come in. Or I try to nod my head and my feet start stomping because all my pathways are muddled up. It's not intellect. It's my motor planning, it's my sensory processing. I need to learn. Yes, nodding your head. Oh, you're trying really hard to keep your feet still. That's okay, I can see you nodding your head. I can see your first movement was to reach out and then your other arm got in the way. I know. It must be really frustrating. Maybe I can help you by supporting that arm so you can use this arm. But it's not about intellect. Let's move on to communication.